Hey, listen in. If you're still strapping your expensive camera to your neck with a flimsy strap that looks like more fashion than function, congrats, you're living on the edge. But hey, if you'd rather not risk turning your camera gear into a pile of broken dreams, then maybe, just maybe, check out Cotton Carrier Camera Carrying System. You can carry on living dangerously, or you can carry gear safe and sound with cottoncarrier.com. While you're in there, use code BTW10 for a 10% discount on anything found on the website. cottoncarrier.com.
Beyond the Wild.
And we're rolling. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Wild podcast. Tonight, Jason and I have a returning guest who we're excited to spend some more time with. Our first podcast with him was cut a little short due to everybody's scheduling, so we thought it was only fair to have him back on and hear more of his stories because his work certainly justifies it. Before we get rolling with that, how are you doing, Jason? What's new?
I'm doing great, as always. I don't know. I'm a pretty lucky guy, fortunate guy, but not a lot new. I did go on another weekend adventure. I, hit the road Friday afternoon and screamed down to southern Utah and did some more landscape stuff and photographed some lizards over in Colorado again. Just did a quick weekend trip.
Again?
Yeah, again. Yeah, it's
Nice.
a part due of that too, right? So I just couldn't get enough. I love it down there. So I just, every chance I get, I try to sneak away. And the moon phase was right. I was trying to get some Milky Way stuff in that. Did get some Milky Way stuff, but it was kind of the cloudy, even I did get some, and it's kind of cool. It's different, right? You could see the Milky Way good, but there's some clouds in there too. So it's a little bit different than I've seen before. So, I'm looking forward to try to process some of those and learn as I go and maybe post a couple of those with the clouds in there too for something different. But
That's cool. I'm glad you're getting out. That sounds like fun. The lizard, I just watched the recent episode where your lizards were at the beginning. Actually, this week's episode that aired today with Colby Brown. I really enjoyed that. And at the beginning, there were some of your lizards. They're wonderfully colorful, right? So I get that. And it'll be nice to see your Milky Way on this episode on YouTube. Well,
what have you been up to, Mark?
Well, as you can tell, I've built a log cabin since our last podcast, which was last night. Right? So
you look like you're in the back corner of a bar.
Oh, it's so good now. I've got the best. This is the best podcast studio that's ever been made. And I did it. The log cabin in minutes. It's something that naturally occurs for Canadians. Building log cabins is just instinct, and it happens very quickly. So this is, in all honesty, a makeshift podcast experiment setup that really has gone wrong. Really has. But it's we have our family here, my daughter and her partner, and Mauricio, and our son Kai are visiting. So my normal place to podcast at this time of day has unpredictable child laughter happening around that is will catch the ear of the audience. So I moved to our garage, and when we started this podcast, I'd splurged on big spending on thinking about what I could set up for a cool studio for Beyond the Wild podcast. And in my mind, it's still a work in progress. It really is. I dream of the day of having something I really like for the show. Haven't given up on that by any means. But I went online for a couple of days and hunted for backdrops. And I spent big money on this faux wood backdrop sheet for like $40. And then a neon sign.
That's 40 Canadian though, right? So
has mountains. What? Well,
40 Canadian, right? So
now you're. Oh yeah. So yeah, it was okay. Right. $12 for you. Okay, it's even cheaper looking now, but it's better than what else is here. And so for tonight, it's a special episode that we can have this makeshift background. And Ron sent me a great Beyond the Wild metal sign that has illuminated from the back that he had in the very beginning. But my wonderful tubular setup for this super lightweight, basically tablecloth, won't hold the big metal sign. So here we are. We're going to make do with tonight. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into YouTube and watching it. And I'm sure we'll have lots of Taylor Thomas Albright Part 2 images to put on today's show that will help create some dynamic backgrounds that are way better than my log cabin. Taylor, welcome back to the show. It's great to see you.
Hey, it's great to see you guys. I thank you so much for having me.
I had a great time the first time, and I felt like as the conversation went on, we had a deadline that night because we had a second podcast following up, which doesn't happen very often. We don't usually book that, but the timing was the only opportunity, really. And so the stories that you were telling at the end, we felt like we're just getting into it, and we hadn't talked about some of your other conservation efforts and things that I believe would mean a lot to you. So we were excited to have the opportunity to do a part 2. And I think it's kind of cool. I mean, podcasts, instead of it being one long one for everybody, and it gives everybody time to think about what other content they'd like to share. And then it breaks it up and leaves a bit of a cliffhanger for our audience to enjoy too. And I know there's more coming because I can, just on your lavish Instagram feed, there's so many amazing images that I know there are stories tied to. But pre-podcast, we were chatting for a minute, and you have a background that is not like my sheet. You have a real background that is way cooler as far as it's a real scene in some town in Alaska that I've never been.
Yes, I happen to be in Sitka. It's a little bit further than I was in Fairbanks, I believe, in our previous part 1. But yeah, it's got a bit of a low ceiling today, a little weather, but it never stops us from trying to get out. And we had a little opportunity with some orcas and some gray whales earlier this morning, which is pretty neat to see those guys out.
Were they separate, the pods, or were the orcas hunting the whales, or was there?
The orcas were cruising pretty good. There was 4 of them, and they were probably separated at some point from the rest of the pod. But the other 2 were just, again, cruising around. We didn't get a good idea. Everyone seemed to be kind of spread out, and it was a challenge just to kind of get our eyes on them. But it was neat to see. The gray whales got a little close, which is cool. It kind of surfaced really neat, a little close to us. And but again, the visibility was a little rough, so it kind of hindered us getting to be, too picturesque.
Mm-hmm. Well, the orcas may not have been transients too, right? They may have been fish-eating orca as well. And I've never seen a gray whale in the wild, so that's pretty amazing. That's cool. So what in this visit in Sitka, just for those that have never been to this part of Alaska, what are some of the highlights that you'd say that you like about the town?
Honestly, compared to like some of the, obviously every harbor town, every town in Alaska is the best town. I would say though that I was pleasantly surprised. The harbor, it's just super clean. The docks are clean. Everything is just updated and fresh and nice. I didn't know for certain, but everything seemed to be kept up a little bit more. And I know that has a lot to do with cruise ships coming in and out. So it does get a little busy at certain times of day, but just walking down by the harbor, walking through the boats and kind of checking that all out, it was pretty neat to see how nice it was. I mean, the town itself is just a beautiful place. Even when it's super cloudy or low ceiling, it's a really neat opportunity to see.
No doubt. Love exploring anywhere in Alaska. It's just something about the energy of Alaska that, I sound repetitive, but it's calming. It's just naturally calming, whether it's the air, or the breathing, the cleanliness of it, the smells of the forest or the sea. It's and just the grand landscapes. You can't take it all in a glance. So amazing. And to get out on the water, I mean, that's a privilege and a wonderful opportunity as well. So very cool. I hope the rest of your trip, I hope the ceiling lifts and creates some grander vistas for you.
Yeah, I think tomorrow's supposed to be a little bit clearer, and again, it's just opportunity to get out on the water. To me, that being in Fairbanks, we're a little bit far from any of those bigger bodies of water, so it's always a nice refresher to kind of get to the harbor and get by the water and just the smell of that air and all that kind of stuff.
It's June. So for the joy of our audience, I've been there in Alaska in July, but we're near the solstice. So what's the day length like there right now?
What's that?
How the day length in Alaska and Sitka? I mean, it's so much,
I mean, it gets dark here. I mean, you'll get some,
right,
you
but
get
not
that.
till midnight.
Yeah, probably closer to that 10 or 11. Yeah, ish. I mean, Fairbanks, it's daylight all the time. I mean,
Right.
it's, I mean, it's a little bit darker than this, but it's almost like less than a haze. I mean, a golden hour, but it's definitely something that if you're not used to, you'd want to put something over your windows or cover your eyes when you're sleeping or trying to sleep, because I know that if it's your first time, it's definitely something to get used to.
Yeah, it's I found it just energized me. The first 2 days, I didn't want to stop because it was so bright and sunny, because the body
Yeah,
just go, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, time's up. You're done, right? So Alaska's amazing that way.
I found that with like everything. You'll come home and you'll either maybe you're eating or you're doing something, and it'd be 8 or 9 o'clock, and it's like I find myself like, oh, I should go outside and do some work, like, because it looks like it's the mid of the day, and I just sometimes it's like you probably shouldn't, because all of a sudden it'll be 12 or 1, and then the morning will come and you're just like, what, that kind of thing. You got to start the whole day over again, and you have to just remember that it's it's a marathon, it's not a sprint kind of thing with some of those daylight hours.
Yeah, fun time management. Yeah, it's such a different experience for us that live much further south, but something to experience. So on the photography side, let's get back into where we left off, and I love the story and the interaction you had with the sow and the 4 cubs, and the images that you collected from that were outstanding, and what a rare event. But let's pick up on how about, I mean, it's up to you. We can get into other stories of some of your favorite images to start the show. I mean, I saw some, whether you want to stick in Alaska, but the spirit bear stuff you have is beautiful as well. And I'll leave it up to you, or the conservation efforts that you're involved in.
The one of the ones that they can kind of tie two of those things together as far as some of the images and the stories with that is 100 for the Oceans. 100 for the Ocean was a print fundraiser they did for the last 2 years that was co-funded by Paul Nicklin, Mitty, and Chase Siron. Basically, it's a 1-month fundraiser with 100 photographers and artists and 100 prints to raise money for, nonprofits and ocean conservation. And in the 2 years, it's raised almost $500,000, which is, for selling prints for 1 month, I would say it seems to be a pretty good showing for that. And there's all sorts of different photographers and artists, around the world who, have some form of background or some liking to the ocean in some form or another. And again, that was a really neat experience to kind of come together, because you want to do your part and obviously donate your print or, help get the word out. So we were trying to make some fun videos about, unwrapping the print, or, just telling people that certain things are happening at certain times. And it kind of got carried away a little bit at times, but it was definitely a fun event. And I had 2 or 3 images. Now it drops my mind, but one of them in particular was one from one of the polar bear trips I was able to take, and that was up in near Manitoba, kind of in the denning grounds in 2002 when I took that image. And again, you never know in these situations, especially with polar bear cubs, like if you're ever going to see them. I mean, you could just show up and I mean, it's never been that easy for me for you to show up and they just happen to walk out and it's perfect. But at the same time, I know that does happen. But yeah, so we're going 3 or 4 days in, and the weather's it's -30 and freezing, -40 and all that. And I just remember as we're going around, we're in like a makeshift van. They've got tracks and stuff, and there's just 5 of us, I think, in the van, and we get a crackle on the radio that, they found a female. They saw a female, and she has a cub or two. They don't know for sure. So we were rounding the bend kind of over a snow hill. And you could I just remember the first time seeing her head pop up, and she's just looks massive. I mean, huge. And you're just like, your heart's racing, you're excited, something's going to happen. You saw something. And then she kind of came out with a cub or two, and then they went to lay down, and she had 3. And that was a pretty big moment. Because at that time, I don't think they in that area been able to document. They haven't been able to document 3 little polar bear cubs for about 7 years. So that was a really neat experience. And as that day progressed, she kind of laid down, and she seemed very comfortable. She must have been a mom for multiple different litters, and they laid down, and the snow just came, and it was kind of pounding on us pretty good. And I was kind of excited. I knew, or at least I hoped, that it would come down and kind of coat her a little bit, because she's laying down and you can't even see one of the little cubs. They're tucked inside of her as how big she is. She's tucked away. And as that snow fell, it kind of accumulated on top of her, and I was waiting for that moment for her to get up, because I just wanted to see her shake off. And that you see that slow motion. I just had it in my head for the whole time, and she gets up and she does this big shake, and it exposes little cubs, and she kind of sits up, and then she has her 3 cubs kind of almost like she's sitting on a chair, and they just boom, and they're about to nurse. And I took a shot of that, and it's kind of that symmetric shot as we spoke of in that first, with the brown bear with the 4 cubs, but with the 3 of them all in her lap. Her head's right in the middle, and it's kind of down, looking at her 3 of them, and I called it the guardian, and it just reminded me she's so much of their life and protects them. She's everything to them. So to see, all of that come together, and that symmetric image, I really like those kind of shots when things they're easy on the eyes. But I used that image as one of the images for that fundraiser. And I was really proud of that one. So that was a very good experience to be able to have, obviously, a good photo experience, but be able to use that image for something besides, just a normal everyday add to your wall.
Amazing. Yeah, that fundraiser is outstanding, and the amount of money, I mean, that's obviously working very effectively. And an image like that, somebody could have 5 lifetimes and not have that happen in front of them trying. So yeah, congratulations. I'm visualizing it, and I don't have the Instagram. Is it on your Instagram?
I'm looking at it right
yeah,
now.
It is. It's
We'll put it on YouTube if you'll put it on there. If you'll
yeah,
share
yeah. It's on. It's one of the ones I believe I can't remember that I haven't looked at my.
Yeah,
It's on there. I'm looking at it right now. So
yeah, you'd be able to tell it's pretty much exactly as that is, but
amazing. I can visualize just the whole description, great storytelling, the build up to it, and yeah, we could just sit and think about that for 30 seconds. I mean, really, that what a privilege. Very cool.
Yeah, and another one of those conservations that have been fortunate enough to be a part of is Remembering Wild. They're if you've heard of them, basically it's a really nice coffee table book series, and it each series is based on a specific animal, and it started off if you start to read or look at the different species, it was more of African animals. I mean, there's leopards and cheetahs, lions, elephants, and that sort of thing. But I was a part of the bear issue, and that even the cover, it just looks so amazing. It's a white polar bear, right? Face forward shot. And that was started by I think it's Margot Margaret. And that series in total, I mean, has raised over $1.5 million with just selling those books, which is also pretty remarkable. But this was, I
1.2
believe,
on your Instagram. 1.2 million for conservation from books, right? I mean, that's from
just from the coffee table book. I think it's up to 1.5 even now, and I think by one of my first ones, I have that pinned just to kind of.
Yeah,
I don't know. I just really was super stoked about that, and it was really neat. And this is more of just me. Like I always just like the appreciation when people see things that I've done or like that just they don't know I've done, but they just say, "Hey, I like this image." And this is a really, not to get too far off subject, but a really funny situation is that when she released those books, there was quite a few celebrities that were kind of, going about, just trying to help raise awareness, trying to, express their like, hey, this is important to them as well. And they like this. And Jason might have watched some of this show back in the day. But if you ever watched Saved by the Bell,
Oh yeah.
One of the actresses from that showed a little story on her Instagram thing, and basically it was her going to that page with my image in it. I was just so stoked by that, just because I was
really? Nice.
I don't know if I saved it or not, but again, it was just a neat thing to see one of those actors do that, who I was like, watched, I don't know, 20 some years ago, probably.
That's really cool.
It's a beautiful shot.
Again, it's nice to see that kind of how many people it really matters to. Again, the world is a much smaller place right now, and it's to be able to have, anyone around the world see something like this and say, yeah, this is important. This is what we want to do, and this is how we can help. It really makes a difference. Every single individual who like or share those kind of things, or who actually participate in buying a book or donating. And I just felt really fortunate to be part of that one as well. I really enjoyed that one.
They're fantastic causes. I'm glad you brought them up so our audience is more aware of them. And obviously our producer JG will put the links you can see on YouTube too. And they'll be on the website, beyondthewildpodcast.com.
The image that was chosen in the book that they used was a female brown bear with a cub. And this image, again, this is one of those things. Yeah, that's my little reveal.
Yeah, it's awesome.
The unboxing of it. And that was kind of also a really neat scene that was taken in Katmai, in the area of Katmai National Park. And I was actually watching that female. She had 3 cubs. And it was just, I guess, one of those scenes that kind of unfolded. There was 2 of the older cubs were, messing around and kind of had each other to kind of play with, the same sizes. And the other one who was in that image was much smaller than the other 2. And again, she's kind of left out. It kind of seemed like that was like, I don't have somebody to play with. I'm a cub, curious, and they always, how they get really crazy and stuff. And so that cub was pulling on mom. It always would just run and then run back at mom and kind of charge at her and try to get her amped up. And eventually that mom succumbed to that and was kind of playing around. And she let that little cub was pulling on her back end and all the fur. And then she kind of crawled around and like looked right inside there. And it was just that. And the actual image, I have that main image actually has the whole family in that group.
Nice.
But it just is one of those scenes where, to me, it's just to highlight that specific moment. I just felt like it deserved its own, cropping of that. So I really like that image. That's a really fun image, and it always gets everyone's attention. Of the mom, how big her head is and her teeth, and the little cub just kind of like, anyone, you can come up with a million different captions of that, and I kind of like that too, where everyone has their own take on it. And most of them, if not all of them, are probably a super hilarious, like funny, like open, like, oh, that is a good one, or that kind of a thing.
That's fun for engagement. So many of your pictures are good that way, where you can ask people on social media to come up with captions, right? That's a good way. And I just looked at your polar bear shot, and the podcast is over. There's no more need to. This is it, right? It's so good. It's one of the best I've ever seen. What?
Thank you.
Yeah, the angle, everything. That's. Oops, sorry, jumped off there. But yeah, it amazing image. Truly, what good fortune. What a beautiful scene. The snow, everything with the fresh snow too, and the sky behind her, and there's the willows on either side, but not busy behind her. Right? Just everything's
Yeah, it's
so
just that
so.
that blue sky kind of broke open, or the snow broke open, and it kind of let us see some of that blue sky. And kind of, again, she's just a massive creature compared, especially compared to her little cubs. And that was, they're a couple of days outside of the den, so they were there for a day or two at most, because she doesn't have any reason to be there other than to get those cubs kind of acclimated and ready to roll. And then they head to the Hudson. I mean, there's no food for her. She hasn't eaten in 7 months, 8 months, and she's really raring to go to get to that food source. So it's a hit or miss on that, but that was definitely a hit, and I'm super grateful that we were able to get out there and be a part of something like that.
Yeah, so I think that's super interesting. That I mean, the biology part, right? So when they come out of the den, these cute little cubs are covered in polar bear hair, but they're still small, and they've got to follow her at this point so she can find food so they can all survive. These little cubs. I mean, what a trick. That's
Yeah,
just
yeah. There's like, again, there's no, I don't know. It's a little bit different if you were to kind of compare it to some of the brown bears or even the black bears or anything like that, because they have that food source. You're at an area where they want to be. They're staying, and for the polar bears, I mean, they're coming out of that area, which obviously she wants to be in that area, but to, basically to get those cubs born and be protected, and then she's off. There's no real need for that. So if they are around, it's usually a day or two, 3 at most. But again, they're traveling miles, and that's under, over the tundra, over any harsh terrain. It's not developed. There's nothing. It's just a vast, snowy ice, negative 30, 40, 50 degrees at times.
wind.
Aaron, she's ready to roll. So
Yeah.
no one really wants to be out there for a long period of time. We've sat out there quite a long time and kept our fingers crossed. But yeah, it's a tough environment.
I have questions I could keep asking about heated gloves and all that, but Jason, I want to give you a chance to get in here.
But it's funny. My mind went to a little bit different approach on this, but you used to go to Yellowstone all the time. We talked about that in the first episode. That was one of your favorite places to go. You now live up in Alaska and have access to Katmai, which is, just one of the most incredible places on the planet for brown bears and fishing and all kinds of fun stuff. And you have quite a few black bears fishing as well, which I need to talk to you on the side about maybe, but, but, do you still find time to get to Yellowstone? And are you kind of spoiled now that you're up in Katmai area and can make that trip so easily? Or, what is that like for you? Do you ever get back to Yellowstone, and is there still a drive for you to go back and visit there?
It's not as easy. Not that anything prior was an easy drive, but it's not as easy to kind of jump back and forth. Alaska's a pretty big place. So unfortunately, I haven't been able to get back anywhere as near as frequent. We've talked about it, and I've really wanted to, again, try to get out there in certain seasons, especially that early spring, and sometimes in the winter too. I was fortunate back, a few years back to get the snowmobile permit a couple of times. So you have that non-commercial guided experience. So basically, you and your own snowmobile, or your rented snowmobile, you can cruise wherever you pretty much want. So that winter, that's a very exciting time to be there. I have not been able to do that and to get there as much as I wanted anytime soon. But I think, in the next year or so, we try to get back. If I do, I definitely would, as we mentioned, I'll give you a heads up if we come across any of those bison being birthed with any of those calves. But, at the same time, in Alaska, it's tough because and the more that I see or hear about people traveling or taking their vacations, you get a really good understanding of how big it is and what it has to offer. If you were in like a place, so I mean, there's no real like love loss as far as if you were to be like, oh, he's in Alaska, that's so sweet. I mean, it is, but at the same time, if you're in Utah and the Tetons and Yellowstone, I mean, you have this, again, there's all sorts of places, obviously I'm leaving out, but you have quite a few places like that. And Alaska, I feel there is a lot of, endless amounts of places that do those great things, but they're pretty spread out. You know what I mean? Right. As far as like, I'm in Sitka and we had to take 2 flights. Multiple flights. It might be maybe not Sitka, but like Ketchikan would be almost quicker for you to get to Ketchikan than it is for me, or just as easy.
Right.
But I mean, if you were to go to like a Wrangell or in Petersburg or, Katmai, it's easier, but it's not like a quick drive. And a lot of these places that are either on the coast or that are in the rainforest usually require either a float plane or a water taxi to get you kind of to the end spot, or at least like a home base near where you could kind of explore those areas. So it's definitely a difference in those 2 places and that kind of situation. But at the same time, it's truly great, and every experience has its own, wonderful thing, if you will, that you can kind of highlight. But it's tough sometimes just because of there's only so much you can, or only so far you can drive sometimes, right. The road or this or that. But again, yeah, it is a lot closer and a lot easier to get to some of the brown bear places, and it makes it a little bit easier and nicer. I would definitely like to, I like that.
Right. Yeah, I would suspect you'd want to fly if you were going to go try to do that, because it is a long haul from Fairbanks to Yellowstone, but might be kind of a fun road trip sometime too, right? I know we know many people that have done it and had a good experience doing that road trip too, but take some time. But.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I guess, just the way I like to do certain things, as far as when I was in Yellowstone, I really like to have a familiar setup or a comfortable setup, even in my car. It didn't have to be like a hotel or any sort of crazy thing like that. It was like I had a really neat setup in my Jeep where I made it so I could have kind of the backside. One of them would lay down. I have like a metal shelf in the back area, and then half of it I have like 2 bins. And while I'm driving, if I'm driving, I have like a little spot on the right side where I built this basically like a table platform that folds up and folds on and has cushions and holds cameras and holds binoculars and all sorts of fun stuff. So then I can kind of go and be dialed in when you're kind of cruising in the valley, or if you're driving, just kind of hear something. You always have to kind of be ready to me. And those are especially those places where I just always have to have a camera out. I was always, one to have like either like when I think you had some cotton carrier stuff at one point that you're, carrying, you got the harnesses on you always have to be like camera ready, even for the ones that, you just don't know about, or it's a little bit tedious to walk like that.
Yep.
I mean, I have, camera on my shoulder, camera on my chest, even when I'm hiking through the rainforest, through boulders and all that kind of stuff, because the second you don't do that is the second that you're going to be like, I should have did that because that just happened.
Yep. Why is my camera in my pack right now? I know better.
Yeah. And everyone looks at me sometimes and I'm kind of teetering over like these barnacles or slippy rocks. And I've got like, Sony with a 400 just on my shoulder with a tripod. And I've got another one here, and I'm kind of jumping off of a boat to try to, get onto land, because that's, I don't want to wait, or I don't want to not have it because for whatever reason it might, something comes up. And
right. Hey, before we transition, I know Mark wants to hear about the bears up in what's the name of it, Mark?
The spirit bears?
The spirit bears. Yeah. Sorry. Holy cow. I just slipped my mind.
Also,
yeah, I was just gonna ask about that one. Before we go there, let's talk about this coastal wolf. That's pretty freaking cool. Yeah.
There's the paws on that pup.
That's so cool.
Those are both near in the same area, actually, like that Great Bear Rainforest.
Yeah.
In 2019, I was able to, and again, some of these places you try to go to for years, or you want to get on lists, or, some of them are just, the access is just super tight. And the Great Bear Rainforest is one of those places you have to be with a native guide. You have to kind of, have, you have to follow the rules. You can't just you can't just get a boat. You can't just walk up to it. So basically, and what's funny, I was in Yellowstone when I signed up for this trip, and it was right before I lost service, and I was kind of emailing back and forth, talking to Tim Irving. I don't know if you've heard of him or not, but I think he's been on the show quite a few times, actually.
Friend of the
Tim
show,
Irvin.
for sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Big love.
Shout out to that guy. He is amazing. He is just one of the greatest guys you can ever meet. And the funny thing is, trying to think of how many I went on. I went on that one trip, and then I was like, I got to go out to that area again. And I signed up for 2 other ones, and then COVID hit, and both of them got canceled, or at least pushed. One of them was the wolf trip, but when I went to the Great Bear Rainforest, he wasn't able to go. So I talked to him for 3 or 4 years before I ever met him in person. But again, the communication was great, and so we signed up for that Spirit Bear trip in 2019. And you get out there, and again, you just never know. I'm expecting the rainforest. It's crazy rain, like it should be. And it turned out to be much sunnier at that point than I expected. We get out there, and you stay in the community with Marvin Robinson is who I stayed with. Again, that guy, there's few people are as great as that, and his family. I love those guys. They're so good to everybody. Just super nice, hardworking, and it's just a pleasure to be with people who are always positive like that. So basically, when you get out there, you stay in that community, and across, I don't know, it's probably like a 25-minute boat ride, maybe or so. You take a boat across the way in the morning, and the Spirit Bear's on different islands. And again, you don't know because weather and the level of the water and the fish and all that kind of good stuff, just like anything else. But you get in the rainforest, and that first day, the canopy is just like perfect. It's just exactly like you'd imagine in a book, in a movie. And, we're kind of cruising along. And at the time, there was a couple famous, or more famous, if you will, Spirit Bears. The one was Ma'a, and she was on the cover of National Geographic, and she was a part of a big conservation effort as well. I believe, Paul Nicklin helped out with that to kind of eliminate a lot of that pipeline stuff and certain things in Canada. But yeah, so again, to see that, and then she was just beautiful. You don't realize, and these creeks, and I call them creeks because I feel like if you say a river, it's just too big. It gives you too much, much of a span. Some spots are 30 or 40 feet across, maybe more, but at the same time, it's a tight area. It's very quiet. You have to, kind of move with purpose when you're moving, and it's that. So I just remember it's probably the second morning, and we're out there, and there's no rain. It is just, and the sun is coming through the canopy. There's a black bear kind of towards, the far end of the river, but the steam is just rising off of the black bear when he's eating. It's almost like you can get the meat sweats, like he's eating and he's like hungry. It's just perfect. And I just love to set up in the water or right on the edge of the water. Like the riverbank is like on my backside. So I'm in there, and you have your long lens. And then you also, I was always trying to keep it shorter, you just don't know kind of a thing, because it's like that or an iPhone. And she comes up, Ma just comes up out of the canopy. Like, again, they're like bears, these massive animals, and they disappear so quickly, and they're not very far away. They're so silent when they move. And she came up, and she comes to the river and kind of just has this meandering, just grandmother presence where it's just perfect. You just have a feel. And she ended up like the way I was, and I kind of, you never know. But again, I felt like she might use the tree by me as her highway. You know what I mean? And you always are very meaningful, especially you guys know with Tim, there's always, bears come first. There's no second thing. That's if you're in the way or there's any harm or any sort of, we want to get out of their way and make sure they're comfortable. So she comes, and she kind of meanders through the river and comes up and comes across my back and rubs just as he goes through. And it was just like, And I mean, I wasn't taking any. You just wait, and it's just that. Like, did that just happen? Like that, you know what I mean? And she kind of keeps on. And I mean, you could probably scroll through, and there's quite a few times. I think 3 or 4 days. The first 3 days, it didn't rain at all. It was the sunniest, most beautiful, picturesque place I've ever been to. But she came up, very, very close to get fish, just to kind of show her grandness and greatness. And I was able to capture quite a few great pictures of her throughout those first 3 days. And again, if that wasn't enough, we were lucky enough to have what they call her Strawberry, and she had at that time come out with a little black cub. And she, being a strawberry female, she had that like reddish kind of burgundy color, if you will, that they kind of named her after, with that on her neck. And her cub was black. So she, that cub came from a black bear that did not carry that gene, just to kind of, put that in perspective. Basically, to have a cream colored or a spirit bear, you have to have, it comes from that recessive or double recessive gene. So if both the female and the male have those genes, then the cub can be that color. And even that little black cub wasn't a spirit bear. It does carry that recessive gene, which then, if that cub mated with another bear, either a cream colored bear or a spirit or a black bear, it would then produce a spirit bear. So it's kind of a really neat genetic dynamic there. But she came out with her little black cub, which was, I believe, one of the first times, if not the first time, that she stayed near the river and meandered. So it was really neat. And there was one really good picture there that I really just love, that it shows her and the cub is just right next to her, like silhouette, if you were real left to right, and the cub is just right in front of her, and it kind of shows the contrast of both of them. And it's just beautiful to see her coloring, and then the black bear, little tiny cub. And Jason, I mean, as you guys know, like the little black bear cubs are just little nuggets, like beanie babies. So they're just teeny, and that's just really neat to see that. And that, I mean, within the first day or two, it was just, what more could you ask? I don't even know if we would see a spirit bear. And, that's the kind of thing where it was like, and all of a sudden 2 days in, or the first day we saw Ma and then Strawberry, and the second day that happened, and it was pretty much the first 3 or 4 days was that. I mean, the weather was just more than you can ask for. And then we were cruising back, and we saw a big pod of whales start to bubble net feed, and you just never, I mean, in the Great Barrier Rainforest, you just don't know. And that was just, so we stopped and watched that when they went, they did it for, I think they did about 10 or 11 sessions where they would go down and you'd see this, and all of a sudden, the whole scene comes live. And it was nice because it was kind of back in a bay where it was nice and calm. You could just, and to me, the big thing is you hear those noises and you can smell that, like once those guys come up and that mist of that water comes, after it gets blown towards you. And it's just, you can see the herring on some of those, like little, like on your pictures, you can see them like coming up, getting chomped up, and the birds are all coming down. And it's just a dramatic scene that really makes that area just super, super special. But I do want to take note that place, again, those first 3 or 4 days was truly just more amazing than I could have asked for. I actually revisited that same location, and Tim was, I believe Tim was there for that. I'm trying to remember. I apologize to Tim for not remembering that, because he was on the wolf trip. But in 2023, we went back there, and it rained every second of the day. So there was a little bit of a reminder there that was like, what, they Great Barrier Rainforest gave a little bit, and now it was like, hey, this is what we're really about. And so, I mean, after going inside at the end of the day, you're inside a house, it's stuff still didn't dry. I mean, it was just completely saturated from head to toe, inside and out. And it was a good refresher that the rainforest is a very saturated place.
I know it's an adventurous spirit, and getting out there gives results. But if you would just take a minute and give me what you would, I know you work hard. I can tell by all your storytelling and your passion behind it. But for just a joke, give me what you would pick for lottery numbers. because
What's
yours.
funny is that would include a 13. For some reason, I don't think everyone likes that, and I'm a really big fan
Okay.
of that. So.
Well, my dad was born on the 13th, so I've never been afraid of it. But it. You have had some incredible opportunities, and I've known Tim for quite a few years. He's a great friend of the podcast, and anybody listening, go back to one of our first episodes of Beyond the Wild to enjoy Tim's company on that. And we hope to have him again on before long, probably, if I have my way. But to have the light you had, like you said, and the experience, it can happen. That's the dream and many people have luck with the spirit bears with Tim. But what you had for those days is so special. I mean, the culmination of these stories are all so moving, and you have great karma, my friend. That nature is opening its door to you in this fashion to have these experiences. It's magical.
No, I appreciate you guys and having the opportunity to kind of hang out with you guys. That's why I was trying so hard. The first time it took forever, the connections and all this and that, and then I was trying to get it to work, and then you were like, "Oh, we can do it this day," and I'm like, I knew I would be traveling, but I was like, "I'll just do it. We'll make it work," kind of a thing, and I just had to,
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Absolutely.
You're not getting off that easy though. You never
I know, right?
mentioned,
What
you never
about the
mentioned anything
wolves?
about the wolf. Yeah.
And that's funny is that what I was out there, and you get to know these guys, and you're talking to them, and you see some of the stuff on their phone, like Marvin and those guys, where it's like he's there every day. That's his world, and to see the things that he's seen, and I love listening to those stories and just the situations that they've been in. And he showed me a few pictures. Obviously the pictures on Tim's website would be enough to like sell anyone to be like an opportunity that could have been that's a possibility. Then I'm going to do this. But the whole remoteness of the trip where you're basically on Marvin's, one of his boats, and there's just bunks made. So you're just sitting out in there. That's where you stay. And, tide comes in, tide goes out. And then during low tide, you basically walk off the boat and you walk to the shore, and there's an area out in the Great Bear Rainforest where these wolves have been known to be. And basically you're just kind of hanging out and chilling a little bit, and you're listening for them. And we just kind of, scope the area. Marvin kind of goes a little bit further sometimes. And at the first day, like the first full day, I guess the next morning, so the second day, we are out on the rocks, kind of out this point. And sure enough, this little group of these wolf pups just kind of cruise across. They're actually like channel goes right in front of us. So they're, I guess, across the river, but nonetheless still super, super close. And they just kind of cruising along the bank, and they start, playing with like barnacles and trying to pick up sticks. And they're starting to get old enough to where they're exploring on their own. They weren't with at the time any specific, leader or pack. I didn't have like it's like a yearling or anyone, it seemed like right at that time. So we were just like, all these little wolf pups. It was just obviously amazing. And everyone's just, we couldn't, I don't know. It just, to me, I'm the same way you guys, as far as your reactions like that. Yeah, I'll do that for a second. But you could tell the dynamic and the leadership of some of these little ones just after a day or two, because, they start to pair up together. And the one that was in that picture was a male, and him, and there was another one that kind of stuck with him a lot, and I believe she was a female, a little black one or darker one. And the other ones weren't as curious the entire time. I mean, they came around and whatnot, but that one, he was at one point, we were in a different location, kind of on the sand in the dirt, and he was very curious to us to see what was going on. And there's a little small group here, and we're just kind of tucked down. And, at first he's kind of come through, and it's like he was licking the water, almost pretending to drink, and kind of peek up with like one eye, and he's walking at the same time. And then if, he felt like we were watching too much, he'd stop, but he'd still be kind of drinking. And then he kind of would come closer. And by the third or fourth day, he meandered so close. I mean, it was iPhone kind of stuff. And it was just neat to see that, like, that leadership role he took with the rest of those pups. And again, he he was by far my favorite to see, and just, because I feel like you can really get to know when you learn their personality, you get to know about that one, or you, at least, you can see their traits. It makes it more enjoyable, because then it kind of ties the human element to it a little bit, where you're like, oh, that's similar to this or that. And again, I know that's just my personal take on it. I know a lot of that stuff isn't scientifically proven, but it's neat to see that, hey, yeah, it's neat to see that there's, this little wolf pup does identical things to a dog, or, one of our dogs, or anything like that. And so he kind of came, went, as you will. But the one time he laid down, he was probably, 20, 30 yards away, and he stands up on this little point. And again, he's just a little guy, and just gives out the biggest howl he could.
Oh,
And
stop. Stop.
yeah, I think I don't know if I've posted, I posted a while back, and it's just like, again, this wolf pup. So it's got the very like puppy like howl,
Yeah.
but he's trying just to give it his all, and he just goes after it. And then he waits a little bit, and you can just go, it's like 2 or 3 times, and it was just as cute as it is, and as neat. I mean, it's just a super cool thing to see, and you just wait to hear back. And he's hearing something. And it's like, sometimes, obviously, I mean, my hearing's pretty bad as it is, but I know that just to see their back and forth as far as hearing the howls, and I'm sure you guys have heard it in like Yellowstone, you hear the wolves going back and forth and that kind of thing, but that little pup trying to be like, hey, like, just imagine what he's thinking, or what, he's like, he's got his little wolf pack, like the little guys, calling back to, like, the older ones. And I talked to Tim and those guys later on, and there was a handful of adults that, I mean, we only saw 1 or 2 adults that whole trip, but we saw that with little pup every day almost. And we saw like a handful. I think there was one day we saw like 6 or 7 little guys. But yeah, that, again, you're on the water or on land, but it's like you kind of go out during a low tide, and right before high tide comes, you kind of make your way back, because you're wearing waders. And if you don't make it, you're like either walking through the water, or Marvin, they had this little baby little dinghy that you'd kind of cruise from, the farthest shoreline, or the closest shoreline from the boat, that we'd go back and forth. It was a really neat experience. Like, you stayed out there, those guys cooked during the day, and then, once high tide went back down, we'd kind of cruise back out. So the trips are tailored around the tide, around the tides, to kind of make it adequate, so it's not, low tide isn't at like midnight or anything like that. Or, I mean, you at least catch 2 of them, so it's 5 or 6 in the morning during somewhat daylight hours, and then you can kind of work from there.
Good logistics. And yeah, I love hearing about the revisiting the same animals day after day, or trip after trip, and they all have different personalities. So the opportunity to observe behavior to that extent is magical and wonderful. So I'm glad you highlighted that part of it too. Your images are superb, capturing that. And what a treat, having my grandson here, and when I hear his little shrill laugh, it can't help but lift the spirits, right? Hearing a little wolf pup howl, how much better does it get than that? And filming that, I mean, wow.
Yeah, and it's neat, because sometimes, like, this area where you're with the same, like, I guess you're with the same pack, or you would at least assume that these are most of the same animals that are right there, so you get to kind of experience all that. But there's no traffic; it's not developed. There's no loud noises or anything like that, and it's really controlled. So it's one of those things where you get to really hear that. Like, I was so happy when the audio came back on that, and I was just like, yeah, like, that was like one of the things I was like so stoked, because it wasn't just my iPhone. I had a nice little Rode mic on my camera, and I was hoping that I'd have an opportunity, because so many times throughout the other places I've gone, there's been all sorts of different noises or wind, or I wasn't set up right, and I was unable to capture like that howl. And like, I haven't had a good adult one, this was even better, because it was so funny to hear like these little guys just kind of do that. And not to get too far off with that, but the little animals, like, I was able, when I was in like far east Canada near Kikatagwa, a long time ago, like, I was able to capture some little polar bears like calling for their mom, because she kind of cruised back and went around the iceberg she was kind of meandering around, and came back while they were sleeping, and then they woke up and she's gone. And then it almost sounded like birds. It was so neat to see. But just those little baby animals to like, and their calls to capture those things. I really like to hear that stuff because everyone's like, well, what are they saying? What is that? That's not them. Like it doesn't sound like a little, what you think a baby polar bear would sound like if, you have an idea of that. But again, that little wolf he was quite a character and super curious. And it just made after that happened, you just look at, like, I looked at Tim and he's just like super stoked. And it just, to see a guy who's out there doing it, like a guide or Marvin or any of those guys. And when they get excited about something, it's something special. And that to me is like, I almost like try to get moments to get those guys stoked, because when that happens, then it's beyond great for everybody. And it just makes for an ultimate experience. So, I mean, I was super, super appreciative of those guys in that location. I couldn't thank those guys enough for all that they've done and the opportunities that they've allowed.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Thank goodness for mirrorless cameras now for situations like that too, because if you have people sitting on your left or right, and if it is that rare audio moment, something as rare as that, then you would hope not to hear the shutters going off to capture the audio. I mean, bugling for elk, it happens a lot. There'll be times that people can be on their own and get the audio, but a wolf pup howling, mirrorless cameras are a game changer to keep that clean. And one other thing quickly, I can't help but the polar bear cub sound. I've spent a lot of time with bears in my life, and black bears especially, and then have heard a lot of vocalizations. And I like to talk with animals, or at least when I'm by myself, talk like I'm an animal. And the black bear cubs is always, it's like, and it was astounding the first time I heard it, because like that can't be. I mean, I know it's not linked. They don't speak English, but it was. They go meow, 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 meow. And it's like they're calling for mom. Like, so some sows will tree them for, an hour while they feed at the base. Other sows are more independent and will tree them for hours and go out of sight and go off and feed. And then eventually the cubs call when they're hungry. So the polar bears, was it anything like that? Or was it different altogether?
It's pretty much, I mean, yeah, you kind of touched on that a little bit when I've heard that almost spot on, by the way. That's the perfect, you might be able to get hired just to have somebody do that, like voicing over a documentary. But that's kind of it where it's at. Like I've heard it where the brown bears or the black bears, like they're not sharing, say somebody caught a fish and the one just kind of got really, really loud on vocal like that. And it's kind of like that. It's like that squawky, like, again, the polar bear one was a little bit on a different area. And I don't know if it was echoing more against like the ice or just the vastness of the area, because it was just an iceberg and nothing. So, I mean, at the time it was, and I can't say it was like perfect audio, but you can definitely, like, it's only them and it's super excited that was it. And it's kind of like a squawking. I can't repeat it like you did.
Well, you can practice when you're on your own, and then.
Trust me, I have. I one day I might perfect it, but I'm not sure I even want to call one of those guys. So.
No, and I don't do it with them by any means, but the fact that it sounded so much like them saying "mom, mom, mom," it's like, wait a minute. And I just love animal sounds. I do talk to animals, but I wouldn't bother a little cub that way. But I just love I love sounds, right? I mean, it's so much a part of their world. The communication is part of their behavior. So the privileges you've had through your adventures to see, record, experience that's what made me ask, because I've never heard a polar bear cub myself. So I just, they're still bears. Is it similar? And maybe to a degree, but they may have their own dialect, right? So.
Absolutely. And that's like what you said about that noise and that, hey, it sounds like they're saying mom, or they're like calling. You can tell they're calling for mom regardless of what they're actually saying. But again, those types of traits and that habit and the way they react and, respond to certain things, it brings a human element to it. And that similarity of how closely related that we really are, and how much, it matters when we do one thing, or they, when they're kind of responsive or not responsive. Each human kind of responds and reacts certain to certain things in certain ways, and we don't all do it the same way, but that doesn't mean it's different or it's bad or whatnot. But at the same time with the bears, it's like they're just reacting to what we're doing in a different way. Just because it's not the way we do it doesn't mean they're not really reacting that way, or they're not having that kind of, response to it. But I feel like that it just, again, I think when you can tie those things together and you make it, have a little bit of a human element to it and you make it relatable, I think that really resonates with people, and it gives them a reason to care a little bit more. You know what I mean? And it's that much more that helps kind of keep these places the way they are.
Yeah, it's what drove me to be inspired me to be a biologist, to study wildlife biology. Was they're mammals like us. I mean, wildlife biology is incredibly vast, right? And entomology, there's so many cool areas, but mammalogy, they are mammals too. They have a mom and a dad, they're babies, they get cared for, they have homes, home ranges, and studying these super cool other species on this planet. I mean, how can you not be interested from my perspective? And we do anthropomorphize to a degree because there are those similarities. They have a mom and they're being cared for in every way, and it's similar to humans. And yeah, they all have their different personalities within the species, and certainly in humans there are all kinds of different personalities. So I mean, observing that is super cool. And how could somebody not be engaged? Just photographing it is the next step in a way, the challenge of it. But just as we've talked about so many times, just experiencing it is worth it. Seeing it, familiarizing yourself with these different animals and learning about them is its own reward. You're there. You got it.
It's super great to hear. I mean, it's always nice because other people think this, and you hope that they feel a certain way about it. But it's nice to be able to have a conversation and hear somebody almost like reciprocate certain things and just understand that challenge a little bit more and understand what you're thinking. I mean, when somebody agrees with you and you don't have to talk to them and say, hey, do you get this? Or you agree with me? Or you not? Then it's like, it's just that the similarities make it's nice to hear. And I appreciate you guys again for having me on and just chatting about that kind of stuff, because it makes it more motivating and more, makes me want to work harder just to, have more experiences to be able to share them and have you say the same things you're saying about that, because it just reciprocates the way I'm feeling. So it's very nice to hear.
Awesome. Yeah, we wildlife, nature, people are all one big happy family in a sense for what moves us, right? And to share it, I mean, that's part of a very big reason for this podcast, and a big reason we hosts are happy to be on every week and meet fantastic people like you who have experienced so much of planet Earth and revere it and share it to inspire others. And just a quick reminder to our audience on Taylor's Instagram, which is Taylor Thomas Albright. If you're not already following him, I hope and expect most of you probably already are. But on his bio there, you can see the conservation efforts he talked about earlier. And there's a link to their their Instagram pages. Remembering Wildlife is one, and 100 for the Ocean is the other. So check those out, because 100 for the Ocean is, I'm aware, is an annual event. Remembering Wildlife, the books, is probably an ongoing project too, to follow those and be aware of what's coming to support conservation efforts that involve so many photographers that give their top-notch work toward these too. So those are wonderful. And again, you can find that on Taylor's Instagram. And if you click the link there, you can also find his website if you want to dig deeper into his work at taylorthomasalbright.com too. So before we wrap up, is there an exciting trip on the horizon, something that's next for you that you can't wait for, or Jason too? I don't want to. Jason may have more that he wants to ask beyond wolves, but
No, I don't, and I'll let Taylor answer that question. But I really appreciate you coming on, my friend. It's good to catch up with you. And I mean, I know if we could ever find the time to connect again in the field, we could all sit around and just tell stories for hours, So it's always a pleasure to spend a little bit of time with you and get to hear more about what you're passionate about, what you're involved in, which is what we're all passionate about and involved in too. So thank you for coming on. But Taylor, go ahead and answer his question.
Yeah, so the last few things I'd like to just kind of touch bases. There's two of them. One of them being the place near Wrangell, again, where those black bears and the brown bears are fishing together. It's kind of a unique spot. I have one or two shots of them actually closer than you'd think. They weren't actually like being friends and kind of doing that together, but they were within 5 feet of each other. And the area is just, again, that rainforesty kind of stuff. And then another, got to go to Katmai every year, or Katmai area, coast and inland, to kind of, get around the brown bears. I just need that fix of those, the salmon and the brown bears kind of getting together. That's probably my favorite kind of situation where they kind of get together, and it just feels like you have more time to spend around them when they're in, feeding, and when they're kind of more comfortable with a full stomach. Obviously, you have to be careful regardless. But
yeah.
And then the last real quick thing is I have to get Mark's address on there, because I know Jason already has some. But I'm going to give you a little shameless plug with these guys.
Absolutely.
And these are the little polar bear magnets. And I don't know if Jason. Oh, see, he's got it. Yeah, he's got it.
Yeah, there. Yeah, got the gold rush.
But yeah, that's polarbearmagnets.com. It's kind of a fun little thing that my girlfriend and I have put together, and we make these little guys, and they're probably the best magnets you'll ever have in your life, and they're the best gift you'll ever give, and everything like that. So
nice.
I just had to throw that in there for a little end of the game.
Absolutely. What an original gift. And they're all different colors. I'm on the website already. Look at that.
Yeah.
And, as we're doing this, we also have tried to get a fund together for a portion of the proceeds does go to help support polar bear funds and polar bear research. So I don't want to obviously say it's all just fun about making a huge mess in the house when we make these things. But it also does go to help polar bear research and polar bear funds, a small percentage of that. So as the more we sell, the more we're able to donate and give a portion of that away, which is obviously super, super helpful for that whole, brown bears, polar bears, everyone. But biggest thing is the polar bears. There's information isn't always there, and it definitely seems to be something that when it's, put in the right people's hands, the exposure helps, and it makes everything a little bit easier for people to understand. They don't, always get that they might see a YouTube video on the news that there's a polar bear stalking around somebody's village, and it makes it look like this polar bear is a crazy, wreaking havoc on this community, when, there's a lot more to it than just that. So again, every penny counts.
Agreed.
I'm glad that you said that you make these too, so that people know this is something that you guys make.
Oh yeah, we make these from scratch. We mix the resin. We come up with all the names. If you go to the website, each name has a unique characteristic of, why we named it and our inspiration for it. Excuse me. And we're able to, put all of the colors and all of that together.
Very cool.
Yeah, some of them glow in the dark. Some of them have, like Alaska themes. There's different bundles, all sorts of fun stuff. I don't want to spend too much time with it, but,
yeah,
they like glow in the dark, stars, even Starry Night glows in the dark. There's one with glaciers, all sorts of stuff. Aurora, I'm not sure. Yeah, he's got Aquarius, glows in the dark. He's got that other Gold Rush. You got some good ones out there.
I got literally one of each of them. I'm not kidding. So
there's 62 different versions.
Well, I didn't get one of each. Then I bought like 10 of them. I think. Anyways,
no, we've added a few. You're good.
Yeah. But no, my intention is to give them away as gifts to the grandkids and stuff for sure. So I think they'll dig it a lot. So it's awesome. It's a cool little gift. So.
And for the Canadian listeners out there, when you pull it up, it automatically comes in Canadian dollars too. Very user friendly, your website. And you can get 4 for $15 or 10 for $35. There's nothing wrong with that price point. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we're not here to, I'm not building a house with that by any means. I can tell you.
Yeah.
It might keep, the Shopify website going by the end of the month.
Right.
But
Oh,
either way, it's one of those things where it started off as we were just making some unique things. I think we were actually trying to make a domino set because my girlfriend's mom was doing that, and we're like, oh, let's try to make some dominoes. And we had leftover resin, and we didn't know what to do, and we're just pouring the resin and stuff, and then all of a sudden we got these molds, and we're like, and it kind of snowballed, and she started bringing home different colors and different flakes, and going to Michael's every day, going to craft stores, and all of a sudden we're putting this combination together, and now I can tell you like the different levels of like viscosity between resins and all sorts of different craziness. And but I mean, we got all sorts of fun names and colors. It's neat to like themes. I mean, she's got like these. We've done Taylor Swift themes because the Eras tour was going out, and all sorts of different ones. So it's
That's fun.
just a fun thing.
Yeah.
Creative Crafts for Conservation.
Ooh, there you go. There's your business name.
Yeah, that's cool. And that you do it yourselves. I love it.
CCC.
And yeah, for sure. Very cool. Quick question before we go. I have to ask this because you're living in Alaska, which is a big part of my heart and soul. And I know that your affinity for bears is as much as anybody's. Any thought about the Glacier blue bear? Going to look for the blue face of the black bear?
I've seen it.
Where, but what an adventure. It's what's the right word for something that you seek, but is so hard to find, but it's out there.
Elusive.
Yeah. Well, elusive is.
I've absolutely heard of. I've absolutely, I've seen a few. Like I saw a while back on something like that on one of them, and again, it's one of those things where it just takes so much to do in like for what I mean. So you're kind of you're always weighing out like
big expense.
I mean, they were eating. I don't know if that's the same bear, but they moved like lifting up rocks, and they were like the main part of their diet was like these big moths that they're like on that hillside that they basically like walk through, and they're like finding like these moths that they would eat underneath like all of the it's almost like a landslide looking spot. But yeah, to see some of that is just there's quite a few places it blows my mind. I hear about them like, man, that's the wheels start spinning, and I'm like, okay, maybe, but yeah, I haven't. And I know I have a couple other friends that have done some other things with different bears in South America and different other things, and it's you kind of get into like maybe I should try to get involved with that a little bit more, and it's it's just starts to spread a little thin, and it's not everything's possible, but I definitely do not rule anything out.
Right.
Yeah.
You'll be the first I'll contact when I'm.
If you get the shot, send it. I've read so much on them, and someday, if time and funding supports it, I would love to try. It would be an epic adventure to go to where they are, and it's simply try. And I know I brought it up a few times. One of my inspirational books on this that planted the seed. Decades ago read, but still covet it and hold it nearby. It's called The Blue Bear. You can find it online. The author is Lynn Schuler, and it's about Michio Hashino, really, an amazing photographer that passed away too young, but was a visionary in our field of photography and his style, and spent a lot of time in Alaska and Russia too. But the blue bear was one of the subjects he coveted. But this book, it just kind of started the thought process. And since you're there, and clearly within 2 seconds of looking at your Instagram, it's something that, but you're right. As you said earlier, Alaska on its own would take more than a lifetime to explore. It's so vast, so magnificent, so many ways that you have to be purposeful for something like this too, and have the time. But anyway, it's if you get the shot, send it, rub it in.
We'll have you on to talk about it for sure.
Oh my goodness. Yes, please.
And everything.
If that ever happened. Yeah, that would be. But it's been a pleasure. Your stories, your experiences, and your genuine emotions and feeling about what's you've seen are clearly felt and relayed. So I really thank you for sharing that with us and with our audience. And I hope you sell lots of polar bear magnets that people will look at, and obviously check out Taylor's Instagram. Yeah, thank you again. Spectacular work, and enjoy Sitka and wherever the weeks and months ahead of you take you, and we'll keep in touch. And everybody, it's been a pleasure to have another podcast with Jason. Ron is absent today. Unfortunately, he did really want to be on the second one with Taylor, but he has a date that he couldn't refuse with a den of swift foxes and potentially coyotes at different spots with somebody who's hired him to do that. So it's time is of the essence right now for that, but we will connect with Ron again soon. Thank you for tuning in. You can find much more information on our website that I mentioned earlier in the podcast, beyondthewildpodcast.com. And thank you to our sponsors, pictureline.com, and to those that have ordered any type of gear from them, camera gear, contact Colin Bigelow. And also, please let them know that you're coming from Beyond the Wild Podcast, so they're aware of that. And they do have stickers that they will give for that. We had 1 or 2 packages go out. We made that right. We have stickers. The merch site, we have more and more people asking all the time. You've been so patient, and we want you to have the hat, the hoodie, the shirt. And so that's something that we haven't forgotten about. It's just something that we have to get to and find a fulfillment site that we want to hook up with for that, for all of you. And make sure, check us out on YouTube. Any of you that take the time to leave us a comment, that's always appreciated. A thumbs up on YouTube, because those are the things that help give us traction. And once again, thank you for tuning in. Enjoy spring's transition to summer solstice, and we will see you all next week.
And that's a wrap for another episode of Beyond the Wild Podcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors, pictureline.com, your online source for everything photography, and Canon USA.